All right, this is the Brattleboro Selectboard meeting for Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. We had an executive session at 5:30 and no decisions were made. So this is the convening of the regular meeting. John, was the meeting properly warned?
Yes, Liz, it was.
Thank you very much. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? All right, let's approve the minutes from April 22nd and April 24th, 2025. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I move to the Select Board approve the minutes from the 22nd and 24th of April of this year.
Great, thank you. Isaac has made a motion to approve the minutes from April 22nd and April 24th. All Select Board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 And that has passed 5-0. Okay, Chair's remarks. I went to a meeting yesterday with VTrans, and VTrans is beginning to explore the long dormant Putney Road improvements. And that was a real nice thing to hear. And first of all, because it's a state road, there is no match. So this would be entirely VTrans money renovating Putney Road. And one of the perks is that they will have a bike lane and a better sidewalk. And one of the problems years ago, and this project started in 2008, was that there would need to be blasting on the rock on the east side near the marina. And that will not be part of this project, but there were many benefits, and we appreciated very much that they're coming. And they're going to have their engineers begin a concept plan and hopefully bring it back to the Select Board by the end of the year so we can review it and approve it if we choose and get on the queue for this project, which will actually take many years to bring to fruition. Other than that, tomorrow night was our information session, and that begins at 7 o'clock, but there are district meetings that begin at 5:45. And this is held at the Academy School, and the new RTM meeting is going to be the following Tuesday night at the high school, and that begins at
15.
6:15. All right, so John, do you have any manager's comments?
Just one thing tonight. I wanted to mention that May 18th through the 24th, this week, is National Public Works Week, and that gives us an opportunity to take a minute to recognize the staff at Brattleboro Public Works who maintain our infrastructure and facilities around town. We have professionals in 6 divisions in that department who are on duty and available 7 days a week and are focused on maintaining services that are really of vital importance to sustainable and resilient community that we have, as well as public health, a high quality of life, and well-being of all the people in Brattleboro. These critical services would not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are always finding ways to improve their skills and improve the effectiveness of the department. They're responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our town's travelways, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, equipment, and other facilities that are essential for our citizens and visitors. We urge all citizens to join us in thanking the staff of the Department of Public Works for their contributions in the protection of our health, safety, and advancing quality of life for all in Brattleboro.
Thank you. Oh, and I just wanted to mention that this budget report that is going to be discussed at the informational meeting, and of course is the subject of the new RTM meeting, is on the website and available at the library.
Mm-hmm.
Are there Select Board members who have comments or committee reports? Yes, Oscar.
I just wanted to say that I went to the Southern Vermont Economy Summit today. Peter was there, John was there, Kate was there, who's here now. Interesting. It touched on economic development, workforce, housing, demographics. It was really well put on. I think by BDCC, essentially.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And it was also just really encouraging to see, a big, well-attended event with people thinking realistically about our problems, but also in a very positive problem-solving spirit. And I think that's going to be a big theme for this year for Brattleboro is, getting up off the mat a little bit and thinking positively and constructively about good things, because based on the summit and other conversations I've been having, I think there's some bright spots in our future that I'm looking forward to working on.
Thank you, Oscar. Amanda?
This weekend was the 50th anniversary of the Brattleboro Farmers Market, and I just wanted to get that on the record. That's the Farmers Market is a really important incubator for small businesses, entrepreneurs, food, farming, and it's vibrant and continues to bring a lot of revenue to our community and a lot of great spirit and incredible food.
Anyone else? Yes, Isaac?
So last month there was an incident that occurred at a playground in Brattleboro where there was some vandalism that occurred, and it included graffiti with hate symbols that are associated with the Aryan Brotherhood and neo-Nazism. In response to that, I had reached out to the Brattleboro area Jewish community to offer support, and just wanted to update everyone that on Friday I met with the chairperson of the Committee Against Anti-Semitism at the community, and in the conversation just communicated support and reiterated the commitment to creating a welcoming environment for people of all backgrounds. And just wanted to reference the Declaration of Inclusion that the Brattleboro Select Board passed on September 20th of 2022 as a document that we can continue to refer back to. I know there have been a couple of mentions of this incident in the press in recent weeks, and so just wanted to just take this moment to acknowledge that I had reached out and am in conversation with the Brattleboro area Jewish community. So the Declaration of Inclusion says that the town of Brattleboro contemns racism and welcomes all persons regardless of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, socioeconomic status, or disability, and wants everyone to feel safe and welcome in our community. And you can read the entire statement. I believe it's on the wall, on the door over here, if you're in the Select Board meeting room, and it's also posted online. Thank you.
Great. Without further ado, Peter, you're good. We'll have public participation. So members of the public who would like to speak about a topic that is not on the warned agenda, please raise your hand. Yes. Please say your name.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Barrett. I'm the principal of Community Schoolhouse and Community House High School. And I also have Jill Stahl-Tyler, who is our executive director, with me. On Friday morning, our school had a dangerous event occur on our campus. It was an isolated event involving a student who became aggressive towards staff. While the details of the situation are not needed here, we did require the assistance of the Brattleboro Police Department. They arrived quickly, even though it felt like forever, and immediately assessed the situation and began supporting both the staff and the student. Their professionalism and compassion allowed the situation to de-escalate quickly and without the need for intervention beyond their presence and supportive conversation. At a time where we see too many people looking to blame the police for their actions, we felt obligated to show those same people the true nature of what the Brattleboro police officers do each and every day. So from Community House, we want to thank those officers who came to help. Officer Hartman, Officer Culp, Officer Curlin Smith, and Officer Hennessy. We truly appreciate what you do. And to the person who pulled into our driveway to take pictures of a family member who was trying to support their child, shame on you for trying to create a negative narrative out of a difficult situation. The family saw what you did and was very hurt by your actions during this very personal and difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Dick?
Dick DeGray, District 8. Our special town meeting is coming up next Tuesday, and I wanted to address RTM members. As a taxpayer, I will be extremely disappointed if RTM sends the presented budget back to the Select Board. If that happens, it's going to have a dire impact on the taxpayers because there is no way that this Select Board will get another budget out to them before July 1st. If you accept the budget or if you choose to reduce it, those are the two lanes that you have. Rejecting the budget as you did last March is not an option for you. So I implore you to make a decision one way or another, whether you accept it or reduce it. The other thing I would say to RTM members is please do not add any money into the budget. There are two positions that people feel passionately about, and I'm one of them who feels passionately about the assistant town manager. I lost that fight here, and I'm accepting my loss. Adding money to the budget is adding to the burden of the taxpayers that we cannot afford. And we'll suffer through the year without an assistant town manager, and we do have a part-time climate coordinator. Now, if that person chooses to leave, so be it. As I say, with everybody who leaves, we'll fill your shoes. We'll give you a cake and bye. But to put money back in the budget is not what we want to do at this time. So I will be really disappointed, and I am going to make a request to RTM members that the vote is recorded. A recorded vote so we can have a record of how people vote, whatever it is. If it's the budget that's presented or a reduction, whatever you do, it should be a recorded vote so people in the community can see how you voted. And next, we're going to have an election in 10 months. It's going to be here before you know it. And we'll see who sticks around based upon your vote. And the last question I have for you, Liz, because you brought it up, when is the blacktopping project going to start on Route 5 and on Route 9? If we can answer those questions. And I actually thought that the Putney Road project was going to get blacktopped this summer because the project that we started in 2008 when I was sitting where you were, and here we are 18 years out. So if you can answer that, that'd be great.
I think I can answer at least part of it is that the road will be paved well before the Putney Road improvements. But look, Dan Tyler's here. Let's ask him. Thank you, Dan.
Hello. We've had some contact with the contractor. They're still working out their schedule. They haven't had a pre-construction meeting yet, but it looks like they won't start until after the 4th of July. So still to be determined where, but we should know more. I think they're looking for a mid-June pre-construction meeting. So.
And Dan, does this factor in the fact whether we have an approved budget or not?
No, this is a state project.
Thank you very much. All right, are there other comments, public participation comments? Are there any online? All right, let's get to our consent agenda. John, would you give us a thumbnail sketch of the consent
Sure,
agenda?
Liz. We have 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. If you approve the consent agenda, you'll be approving a third-class liquor license renewal for Martocci's located at 75 Elliott Street. You will be accepting and appropriating a FY25 municipal planning grant for capital programming in the amount of $29,700. And finally, you will be accepting and appropriating a $124,405 grant awarded for as a FY25 Downtown Transportation Fund grant for enhancements on Bridge Street. And I just got to commend Sue Fillion for writing and getting both of those grants. Really outstanding work. So.
She's a champ. Okay, may I have is there anyone who wants to pull anything from the consent agenda? All right. May I have a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Sure. I'll
Okay.
move to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Great. Oscar has moved to accept the consent agenda as presented. All select board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And that has passed 5-0. All right, regular business. There's a list of committee vacancies, and I will read them off unless there's another volunteer.
I'm happy to do it if you want.
I'll do it. Okay. I will read the committee and how many vacancies there are. And this is being released so that people sitting in their homes will say, how can I volunteer to serve our town? Well, you could join the ADA Advisory Committee. There's 3 vacancies. You could join the Arts Committee. There's 4 vacancies. You could join the Brattleboro Housing Partnership. There's 1 vacancy. There's the Citizen Police Communication Committee. There's 1 vacancy. The Conservation Commission, 2 vacancies. Design Review Committee alternate, 1 vacancy. Development Review Board, 2 vacancies. Development Review Board alternate, 3 vacancies. The DV Fiber Board, 1 vacancy. The Energy Committee, 1 vacancy for a 2-year term and 1 vacancy for a 1-year term. There are 3 vacancies for fence viewers, 3 vacancies for honor roll, 1 vacancy for the inspector lumber, shingles, and wood, 1 vacancy for the Nelson E. Withington Fund Advisory Committee, 1 vacancy on the Planning Commissioner, 1 vacancy on the Recreation and Parks Board, 1 or 2 vacancies in the Senior Solution Advisory Council, 1 vacancy on the Traffic Safety Committee for a 2-year term, and 1 vacancy, as a citizens representative, and 2-year term as a school representative, another vacancy. And there's 2 vacancies on the Tree Advisory Committee and 2 vacancies as weigher of coal. And so there is a form to fill out on the town website. And if you have any questions, I'm sure you could speak to the town manager's office, speak to Jessica Stickler.
Yep.
Okay. Any further comments on that item?
I have 3 questions.
Yes.
For our viewing audience, could you detail what fence viewer, honor roll, and weigher of coal positions entail?
Pretty self-explanatory, man.
I mean, do they say what they... Do they mean what they say?
I would say if anyone wants information about that, they should contact Jessica, and she'll explain the duties of all of those, any of those positions in the committee. So.
And are there details of each committee on the town website? Little blurbs about them?
I think there are for some.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if all of them have it, but we could check into that and see.
And I know that there was an agricultural advisory committee. And I wonder what's happened to that. That was with the support of the planning.
These are the ones that there's vacancies for. There may be bona fide committees that have no current vacancies, and therefore were not just listed.
Okay. And how do we find the information about that?
Ask Jessica Stickler.
Okay. I think it's not.
Yeah, there is information
I think
on the
it's not
website,
active.
too.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Anyone else? I'll move right along. So the Community Development Block Grant closeout hearing for Windham and Windsor Housing Trust Scattered Site Program. Do we need to introduce that?
You should open a hearing for that.
All right.
First of all, and then officially open a hearing. And then we will invite Bruce Whitney to come up to the table and explain the program and the results of this.
Great. I shall hereby officially open the public hearing for the closeout of the Community Development Block Grant Program, a closeout hearing for the Windham and Windsor Housing Trust Scattered Site Program, and I would be happy to welcome Bruce Whitney to the table. Please.
Same procedure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Whitney. I'm the Director of Home Ownership with Windham and Windsor Housing Trust. And this is the closeout of the Housing Stabilization Program, not the Scattered Site Program.
Oh,
so,
okay.
I did provide a memo, which is titled the Stabilization Program. We also
yes, it's
do.
Here in our packet.
Okay, great. We also do the Scattered Site, but I'll be back in the fall on that one. All right. So the Housing Stabilization Program was a CDBG CV COVID dollars. Congress passes additional CDBG funds for disaster recovery, and in this case, COVID recovery and stabilization. The state worked with the network of 5 homeownership centers around the state to stand up a program. It provided 3 things in the Windham and Windsor counties. It provided financial assistance to eligible homeowners and renters. We provided financial payments towards mortgage, utilities, oil, heating expenses, water and sewer bills, property tax bills, etc. And we did that with 38 households. We also provided financial counseling to people, just general counseling if they were, struggling with bills and wanted that type of assistance. There was also mortgage assistance programs being run by Vermont Housing Finance Agency and rental assistance programs being run by the Vermont State Housing Authority. So many people needing help with paperwork there, et cetera. We helped them. And so we helped 330 individuals with that. And then we also were able to add a little bit of money for repairing some of the apartment units at the chalet, permanently supported housing. We had done a quick rehab early in the pandemic, and there was additional work needed. I did provide a chart in the memo, and I just want to thank the town of Brattleboro and all the staff. It's wonderful to work with the town on these CDBG grants, and they're regional in nature. So you're not just helping people in Brattleboro, but you are helping the entire region. So thank you very much for that. And, a pretty decent percentage of Brattleboro residents do receive assistance through these programs. You'll see the scattered site. It's even higher than on these percentages for the housing stabilization.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And I thank you for this work. It's a very valuable service that you provided to our town, and I'm sure it kept many people in their homes, especially during COVID. Yeah. And I know people who availed themselves, especially of, some apartment repair work, and was really, really needed and necessary. So thank you. There are other people who'd like to comment? Anyone from the public? Anyone online? Anything else you'd like me to say before I close the public hearing?
I don't think so. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks. All right. I get to say moving right along. Pardon me? I thought I did, but I'll officially close the hearing if you'd like. I hereby close the public hearing for the Community Development Block Grant for the Windham Windsor Housing Trust. Okay, the next item is rail service resolution. John?
Yeah, so the town received a letter from Larry Schaefer, who's the president of the Central Corridor Passenger Rail Coalition. Is Larry here tonight? I don't know if Larry is here tonight, but he is essentially asking the board to support a resolution that would request expansion of passenger rail service from Brattleboro to New London, Connecticut. This organization, the Central Corridor Passenger Rail Coalition, is working hard to improve that type of service, as well as connecting stops, which would allow people traveling that rail connection to make connections through on other rail lines. So anyways, in the board's packet is a possible resolution that he has requested that you consider passing this resolution.
Great. Would someone on the board like to read this resolution?
I wouldn't mind, but I'd love to ask a question, because the
please.
letter that was the preamble to the resolution in the third paragraph had me very confused, talking about the Palmer location and then the bad news of its location. I was very confused. Is that germane
That's
to
at the
the
other end.
resolution?
It's not germane to us. It's germane to, I think, the New London location,
Right.
where the other end is. So no, it's. I think he sent this out, but really he's enlisting help from other towns and talking about the problems that he may or may not have with this Palmer Street location, which is in Massachusetts.
Right. I see John saying something as well.
That's
Okay.
correct. It's kind of a separate issue. That's why I mentioned that they're working on rail connections all along the line to find the best solutions there. But that's not really a part of the resolution. The resolution's more about just the rail service in general. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for clarifying that. All right. So I'll read this. Resolution of support, Central Corridor Passenger Rail Service, April 10th, 2025. Whereas passenger rail service is a valuable tool that provides reliable, safe, and environmentally sound transportation options for our citizens, and whereas passenger rail service supports economic development, affordable housing construction, job creation, and tax-based growth, and whereas passenger rail service connects our community, our friends, and neighbors in a way that supports both our community and our region, and whereas passenger rail service provides an addition to our transportation systems that is environmentally friendly and responsive, and so therefore be it resolved that our community supports the effort to return passenger rail service along the rail corridor that extends from Brattleboro, Vermont to New London, Connecticut, and encourages all public and private entities to include the United States Department of Transportation, Federal Railroad Administration, the Vermont Department of Transportation, the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and all other governmental organizations commissioned with the task of providing important transportation, environmental, and economic development services to our communities to support the return of passenger rail service to our region.
Great. Thank you very much, Amanda. Now, there is a proposed motion. Maybe we could get somebody to read that. Isaac, you want to read that?
Sure. Anybody else have it right in front of them?
I got it. All right, I'll motion to adopt the resolution of supported Central Corridor Passenger Rail Service as presented.
Great. Is there anyone who, on on the board who would like to discuss the merits of passing this motion?
I think it's good.
You think it's good? When I hear New London, being the Jersey girl that I am, I think, wait, that's the beach. And I'm all for it.
And you can catch a ferry from New London to like the end of Long Island, right?
Yeah, you can go to Montauk and other beach towns, yes. There are members of the public who would like to speak. Mr. DeGray?
I don't know how many of you are aware that the sidewalk from the new bridge down to Royal Road, which is the entrance to Morningside Commons, is being held up by the railroad. We need an easement to put the sidewalk in. We have the funding, but we can't get an easement. This project's been going on for 4 years. It's not quite complete yet. And so I'm going to ask you not to forward this resolution until we can get an easement so we can get the sidewalk in, which I believe is essential to residents at Morningside and the shelter that will be built and completed sometime September next year. And I believe you should be using your influence to help us get that easement. It is such a small parcel of property, I just scratch my head. In dealing with the railroad, which when I was sitting where you were, is a difficult process, and I can't understand why, for the life of me, why we don't have that easement. And so having Larry here, who signed this document, maybe help us get that easement would go a long way to getting that sidewalk in, which I think is critical to the residents at Morningside and the new shelter residents that are going to be coming. Thank you.
Thank you. I note that the person who sent this letter really has nothing to do with the rail line.
Sure.
Is it Conrail?
That's the problem with the
Yeah.
easement. It's Genesee in Wyoming, I think, is the owner, yeah.
I mean, in my 40 years as an urban planner, rail companies are notoriously difficult. And I mean, I'm sure that, will we be meeting with Amtrak at all in the near future?
We probably will be. I can certainly look into the status of this. I've heard about this issue. I don't know what any role that the town has or what the current status is, but I could look into that and update you.
So
Sure.
let's leave it in our town manager's capable hands and go along with this discussion that really has nothing to do with, this is a private entity that's trying to establish or reestablish a passenger rail line from here to New London, Connecticut, and I'm sure we all support that. Gemma Seymour wants to speak to us. Is there anyone else online?
Hi. I'm a little confused about this resolution because we have passenger rail service between Brattleboro and New London, Connecticut via Amtrak. And there's no mention in any of this document as to whether or not this entails establishing an entirely new separate service from Amtrak, which I would imagine that is what this is about, because otherwise, why would we need this resolution? Thanks.
I think the existing rail service is to New Haven, and so I think this is establishing or reestablishing a long dormant line, and I don't see a problem with it. I don't see a problem with supporting rail service, which is, as we all know, a very sustainable means of travel. Anyone else have any comments? Oscar?
Just to reply to Dick, I agree that I don't think this letter is leverage in that effort, but I think if there are ways that the select board or the town can be helpful in making that happen, we'll definitely do that. We'd like to see that happen. So.
Yes, which is
Dick, let me give me some information on it, and I'm happy to do a little research and see what we can move in that capacity. I was not aware of that issue.
All right, then. All select board members in favor of adopting the resolution of support for the Central Corridor Passenger Rail Service as presented, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 Okay, that's 5-0. All right, now, moving right along. Next is Green Mountain Power Company update. Tim Jones from Green Mountain Power will be in the meeting to discuss various upcoming Green Mountain Power projects with the board and the public. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
Please.
All right.
And introduce your colleague.
I certainly will. Thank you. Tim Jones from Green Mountain Power. With me is Carol Weston, also from Green Mountain Power and part of our executive leadership team. And thank you to Jessica for getting us on the agenda tonight. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come here before the board informally to share some exciting news that we have regarding a capital rebuild program that we embarked on last fall. It's called the Zero Outage Initiative. And that's a program by which GMP is focusing on its worst performing circuits in our service territory, and then basically executing a plan to originate and prioritize those projects according to sort of the 20 worst ranking that we've established, and focusing on our worst performing circuits and originating, prioritizing projects that will basically take those circuits into a rebuild category that will presumably remove them from that list, or certainly de-escalate them from the outage history. So how we get circuits on that list really is pretty simple: number of line miles, number of customers, number of outages, and severity, duration of the outages as we look at the prior 5-year window. So last fall we were successful with the state at bringing forth a proposed body of work on these 20 worst performing circuits, and granted permission for the next 2 years, culminating in October of 2026 to identify and execute, rebuild, and put in service strategic projects against that backdrop, against that script. And the opportunity tonight is for us to really just share that program. We don't have any specific asks of the town tonight. I do expect that we'll be back later this summer. Carol and I have been on tour here for the last couple of months, probably close to 20 communities that we've canvassed since we started. And then June, we'll sort of be coming back around to some other select towns with work that we have ready, shovel ready to get into this summer. So the tenets of our program are really to, in the more urbanized areas, let's say Western Ave, for example, on the west end of Western Ave, where we have a project which is a candidate for a rebuild in place overhead with our best storm-hardened technology, going from sort of the open wire configuration you see there, but really the project would go from I think it's Meadowbrook Road to about Sunset Lake Road, sort of that last mile of Western Ave. All that very busy overhead will be rebuilt in place with more resistant, storm-resistant conductor and taller poles, again, just giving ourselves a rebuild and putting to rest any sort of problems along that stretch. Of course, a lot of businesses along there, but that also sort of ties in going out west where we've rebuilt over Hogback in the past years as well. So it gives us the ability, this program gives us the ability to identify lines that we can work on that give us the biggest benefit, i.e. get to the most customer value that we can by rebuilding them. Therefore, when we have an outage, the main lines are protected, and we're really dealing with those things sort of off those main lines and focusing our attention there, where in past where we have a main line, and if that's not storm hardened, that's down, that becomes our focus to get that back up first, So it just sort of lengthens the duration. So as we get out into sort of the more rural areas, and we were able to do a small project on Melchin Road last year with the cooperation of Mr. Lynch and Mr. Grover. We actually toured that project today. We certainly have some housekeeping to do up in there as we wrapped up late in the fall, and I believe it's spring, and so we're going to get back up in there and get our housekeeping done, and that'll be a sort of a proof of concept that we'll have in our back pocket when we come back to the town with some more specific acts. So that's really one of the big calling cards into the more rural areas, is burying our lines underground, and we did quite a bit of work. Last year, we got about 20 miles of our line underground, so our focus last year was Townsend, Jamaica, Wardsboro area, but we also spent quite a bit of time in Halifax. And come June 2nd, we'll be returning to Halifax, and likely we'll be there for the entirety of the summer, really into November. We have about a 6-month season that we can underground. So we'll be vigorously going after as many miles as we can, hopefully another 20 miles in Halifax this summer, mostly burying our lines underground. So again, I think we have a very good proof of concept, and we're already seeing the net benefit of that by getting after these main lines and going to these towns and validating that the outage experience is slackening, shall we say. So again, more work to do, but I think what we're doing, how we're prioritizing, what we're identifying is really starting to pay dividends in our customer and partner community. So essential that we have town partnership in these projects. We can't do it without you, even though some of our work, they say Western Ave is a state highway, and we'll certainly have a state highway permit to operate that. We certainly need to work with your public works. And what else is going on Western Ave right now? You know, it's going to be summer. We've already talked about road construction. It's already here. So some of the things that we'll reach out, we'll probably be ready to build that Western Ave project, probably late June, July. So we'll coordinate behind the scenes and make sure that our traffic control planning, our time of day, and all of the sort of logistics that go around that project sort of pass muster with what the town might be having going on out there. But certainly open that channel of communication with our construction management team to say if there's any issues, any day, any time, here's a chain of command, or here's who you call to help remedy those situations. And I think when you see us again, we're looking at some areas just by name, Sunset Lake Road, out in the Ames Hill area. Again, some rural areas where you have some significant populations, but we do have some lines out there that present a great opportunity for us to go out and really harden some lines along some of those main drags out there. Sunset Lake, a very long road, also Ames Hill area. Give us the opportunity to get that squared away. And proof of concept, there are some other things that we're working on with the state. Hopefully will come to fruition in the future, where sort of that last mile that we haven't gotten to, we have some opportunities there, possibly storage programs or something along those lines. But in order to get there, we have to rebuild our mainline infrastructure and really get that bolstered and hardened, give us the ability to really pivot or pinwheel off of that rebuilt infrastructure and really, get out into some of the more problematic areas. So that's sort of it in a big roundabout way, our zero outage program, and certainly welcome any questions. But again, thank you for allowing us to get into Melchin Road last year, and again, looking to prove those projects out over and over again in that style that it's the undergrounding is going to really work for us.
Great, Tim. Thank you. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Do you have a list of properties or areas in Brattleboro that you intend to work on in this calendar year?
Yeah, like I said, probably the Ames Hill area.
You don't have like a list?
Ames Hill Road. I can provide a list. Those projects are currently in design, but I could give you some sort of outline of the areas where our designers are looking, because folks will see our people out there pounding stakes in the ground or tying ribbons around poles, and so sort of smoke.
We'd like to have a list.
Sure, I can provide
if you
you
could give
a list.
the list to either our town manager or the head of the Department of Public Works. Also, I wonder, before you do any work, I'm assuming that you notice the stakeholders, the property owners?
Correct.
And then you also notice the town?
Correct.
And can you tell me how many miles of underground utility are currently in Brattleboro and are planned for Brattleboro?
I could not tell you miles underground right off the top of my head, but I will include that with the list.
Great.
Currently, under this Zerage program, we don't have anything in town proper that we would be doing underground. It's mostly where we're looking out into the more rural areas, specifically dirt roads are sort of our prime opportunity.
Well, I mean,
there.
undergrounding is a really valuable service that utilities are providing, and especially for storms and reducing potential outages. I'm all in favor of that. If any of my colleagues would like to ask questions or comments?
I would love to ask some questions. So I actually live on one of the roads that you're doing, and I've had great connections with, I think, your third-party contractor who's doing that, pulled into our yard, asked to actually move a pole. They were able to provide a lot of information. So I think our public would like to know about the third-party contractor that actually does the carving of the road and who you're working with. In terms of noticing the residents, I have not seen anything from GMP, whether it's a postcard or notification. And we own like 600 acres that you're on that line. So, so just curious, maybe I missed it, but I just kind of flagged down the guy who was putting the flags and tell me more about what you're doing. I want to say that the work you did on Milton is awesome. 2 brush fires in the last, 7 or 8 years,
Yeah.
Significant amounts of forest fire and resources going into that, a quick solve of that, and how quickly you came in, did it, and had it completed blew my mind. I was like, so that's awesome. And also the speed at which you actually accomplish this through your third-party contractor. It's good for the public to know how long their road's going to be blocked, because it's surprisingly not that long. So anyway. And then also possibilities for fiber and all that stuff that go into when the conduit's laid. I think the public would probably like to hear about that.
Sure. I'll sort of take them in order if I could. So just your own personal situation, we typically do not canvass our customers or folks along the line until we're getting a little bit closer to pre-construction. So right now it's just project concept going out, conceptually laying out the line. Will this work? Is it constructible? Those types of things. And so I think the interaction you had is what you would expect, is just being, having our folks out there and being approachable. So certainly if we had a project that was planned, we do weeks in advance of construction notification just to let folks know. And that's really after everything's shovel ready, after we've been back to the board, gotten everything approved, generally announce ourselves, and then folks will get that mailer. We also have the ability to go to door with door knockers, whatever it takes to really just sort of make contact with people and just make sure that they know what's going on. Our contractor, our construction management contractor, is a company by the name of Qualis. So we employ them. They have project designers, right-of-way agents, and construction managers. So they basically give us the whole gamut of what we need to originate and build and close a project onto our system. And the trenching contractor is PLC, P as in Larry, C. And that's a specialized company that we partnered up with about 1.5 years ago that does this specialized direct bury trenching work for us. You may have seen the big orange machine out there with the 10-foot cutting wheel that installed those conductors out in Melchin Road, and that's what we'll be employing across Halifax this coming summer as well. So that's PLC, and we also have some other local contractors that support them with earthwork and replacing all the lifts in the road and doing restoration work as well. And then we always have a GMP employee on these projects that's also out there and available. Safety and customer service first, but then anything sort of that happens that would need escalation or any sort of input from one of our own professional linemen to make sure that things are going to standard. So those are some of the fail-safes that we have in place. And I forgot, was there one more?
The conduit.
The conduit, yes. So we are, GMP is taking the initiative of putting a spare interduct conduit in the ground with our power conductor that has room, I believe, for up to 3 telecommunications, or joint utility partners, as we call them. So that is our calling card when we reach out to the operations folks at those utilities and say, okay, here's where our project work's going to be, mileage, location, here's what we're putting in the ground, and then that's a separate sort of licensing agreement that we have on the other side. But we are making available everywhere we go underground, we are putting spare duct in the ground so the joint utilities can be enticed to join us underground and get all in there. Did I miss anything?
You got it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Other
you.
members have comments?
Sure, just a quick question. I assume, like, is there a priority that you'll be kind of tackling these things? I'm thinking, I know, and I ask because I almost never lose power where I am, so, like, if there is a priority, like, I'm waiting a long time. But do you guys, is there a priority?
There is. There's a top 20 worst circuits in our company, so we're really focused on the top couple right now. The EJG7, which has probably seen the most work, which is the Jamaica, Townsend, Londonderry, Stratton area, and the 56G1, which is down in the Halifax area. So that's been our primary focus. Those two areas will again be a focus this year. We're obligated under our order from the state,
Tim,
where we've identified a couple of
let's talk
circuits.
about Brattleboro, because that's what we care about.
I was trying to
Are
answer
there-
the prioritization.
Yeah,
No,
but
I'm
within
sorry.
your prioritization list, are there sites in Brattleboro?
Yes. Yes, there are sites in Brattleboro that are on our top 20 list. Yes.
In Snowmageddon of March of 2024,
Yes.
we were out of power. We have a dairy farm, right? We were out of power for 7 days. That's a long time to run like a diesel generator to milk your cows and cool the milk. So we are thrilled. Yeah.
Well, I can assure you that was a major catalyst for this
I think we got
program.
covered by WCAX. It was real exciting.
But again, a lot of big main lines down that we're trying to remedy. So Brattleboro is on our priority list, and like I said, we'll be back this summer. We will send a list following up this meeting just to show you geographically where those areas are. Certainly welcome any questions in the interim, but we will come back with a formal ask.
Great, thank you, Tim. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Anyone from the public? Yes, Randy.
I'm Randy Blodgett, District 7, out in West Brattleboro. So I live on Olson Drive. It used to be a small dairy farm 50, 60 years ago. We had multiple wires down. We were also out 108 hours. We were on generator. But it started fires twice. We had the fire department out last year. Thankfully, it didn't cause a forest fire, but the lines were energized. And by the time the firemen and your crews figured everything out, it's 2 or 3 hours watching the lines glow and whatever, and I didn't know if we were on the list. I just wanted to ask.
I will identify that when I send the list in, and I will search that out and see if it dovetails into something that we have on our list. But thank you for the feedback.
So, anyone online, Seth? And before we leave, before you leave, stay here. I just wanted to thank your group for your speedy and helpful work with the SIT fire. That was really helpful. And
Welcome. I'm glad
we
that,
all appreciate it.
we could respond.
Yeah. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
So thank you. We look forward to your work, and we look forward to your list.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Have a great Memorial Day. Thank you.
All right. Next is a discussion of the utility rate study. John?
Yes, I'm going to ask Dan Tyler, the DPW director, to come up with a consultant from NewGen. And I think Dan will step us through this project.
Sure, thank you. Mike from NewGen is back. The last time we were here was in February, and we kind of went over how Mike and his colleagues would tackle this rate study that we contracted with them for. Since then, we've dumped a lot of data their way, and he and his colleagues have been digging through it and compiling it into their program, and Mike's going to walk us through a presentation of their findings. Not looking for any decisions from you tonight, but maybe some feedback. And in the background, we're working on the utility budget, which we'll bring back to the next meeting. So
Dan, before Mike begins, your background in this memo was interesting because it just shows that our utility rates are fluctuating. And so the goal of this study is to have stability, correct?
Right. Typically, we set the rates on a 5-year schedule, but we revisit them each year. So a few years back, the utility appeared to show a surplus. The board chose to kind of level the rates. We've been doing a lot of work to identify needs throughout the utility, upgrades to assets and capital planning work, which has driven the capital costs up, the needs in the capital plan up. So last year we raised the rates to kind of meet that, and out of that process came this recommendation of this study from the board. So here we are.
Great. I just wanted to set the stage. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good to see everybody again. I know we were here last February, and I believe other than the snow, it doesn't feel much warmer right now. And I'm actually heading to Boston to visit family tomorrow, and I think the nor'easter's coming. Yeah. So
It's quite a storm.
might make it tough for the Red Sox game. So I have a brief presentation. Stop me along the way if you have questions. Next slide, please. So as an enterprise fund, as the water and sewer utility is, it should essentially be run as a business, as its own enterprise. It should not be taken from the general fund, other than for things like support services and things like that. Some of the business fundamentals as an enterprise fund is revenue sufficiency. So revenue should meet or exceed expenses. We're not trying to take a profit. We're just trying to make sure our revenues cover our expenses, and that we're segueing to the next one, also maintaining some reserves. So we recommend both an operating and a capital reserve, and we're going to talk about that. And then obviously we want to make sure we're reinvesting in the system. We just talked about underground pipes. Water and sewer is all underground pipes, and it's an unforeseen asset and infrastructure that customers don't really know about until there's a pipe break or something like that, and a main break, and you see water shooting out of the street. It's usually your largest investment as a municipality, water and sewer infrastructure, the treatment plants, the distribution lines, collection lines. So we want to make sure we're planning for the future in capital. Next slide. So what are some of the factors that affect your charges and your rates? So first thing is really inflation. So your operating maintenance expenses. These are your salaries, your benefits, supplies, materials, chemicals, electricity. We're being conservative here, and we're using a roughly 3% inflation rate. That's roughly what the CPI has been the past 20 to 30 years. I know in the past few years we've seen higher inflation. We had 8% a couple years ago. It has now come back down to more the normal average level. Capital improvement plan, as I mentioned before, that's usually your largest driver. So whatever Dan needs to do in public works in terms of reinvestment and building projects, that's usually going to be the largest cost driver. And we look at the funding sources of that. So are we going to fund it directly with cash, meaning we have to raise rates that year, or can we use some reserves? We have some cash left over, or do we actually debt fund it, because these are long-lived assets, and we make sure not just today's customers pay for it, but those in the future who are still going to use these assets will help pay for that. And that's usually done for really large projects, because you can't really, multi-million-dollar project, you're not going to raise rates multiple percentage in 1 year. You really want to spread that out. Debt service are both existing debt service. You have some water and sewer projects that currently have some debt service on the books, principal and interest. We have that in the model going out till it's exhausted. And then, as I mentioned, any capital projects that will project future debt service, we've calculated that based on interest rate, maturity, things like that. We're being conservative in terms of customer growth and usage growth. So in terms of actual water usage and customers, our assumption is that the system's fairly built out. The town is fairly built out. There's not a lot of areas where we're adding a lot of new development. So we're saying here, the customers we have today are roughly the customers we're going to have tomorrow. If you do have a pocket of growth here or there, then that's certainly just going to help the bottom line in terms of any required rate increases. Same thing on miscellaneous revenues. This is anything other than rates and charges. This is any like interest or penalties, or you might you have fire line charges, things like that, miscellaneous ancillary fees. we're essentially assuming those are roughly going to stay flat. And then the two reserve targets I mentioned. So an operating reserve target, this is typically tied to your operating expenses. So as your expenses increase, so should the reserve target. And that's typically we're setting at a minimum of 25% of operating expenses or 90 days. So essentially, if you brought no more revenues in the door today, you'd be able to operate the system another quarter, which matches your quarterly billing frequency using that reserve. And you can kind of use that as a rate stabilization. So if you have a summer where it's really wet and people aren't watering their lawns, you're not bringing in the revenue you thought you might have, you can use that to offset that. And then a capital reserve, and here we're tying that to your system asset value. So we have all your fixed asset data, and what we're looking at here is getting that to a 2% of system value, not right off the bat in the first year, but over a 10-year period, and that equals roughly 50-year useful life. So a lot of the pipes should last longer than 50 years. Buildings, things like that, they're probably around that period. Next slide. So what we refer to as the revenue requirement, that's just the revenue required to be collected. It's just a fancy term for the cost of the system. Again, at the base is your operating and maintenance expenses. Again, materials, supplies, salaries. Current debt service, so any debt service on the books. Any cash running capital projects. So typically routine projects you're going to do each and every year. It doesn't really make sense to debt service those. You kind of want to just pay for those through rates. New debt service, so that's more for the one-time lumpy capital projects that are probably too big to do in any one particular year. And then there's reserve contributions. So we add all that up, and that's our revenue requirement. Next slide. So here we're just looking at water, and this is the capital improvement plan. And so I know it's hard to see there, but the top chart shows the capital improvement plan by funding source. And all that green is debt funding. And so that real large chunk there, I think that's water line replacement is what that is, that they've identified in the CIP, and it's a large chunk there, but that's going to be debt funded. So you won't see the rates having to jump up in FY30 because that's actually smoothed out by making it debt service. And then the blue is just cash funding. And then the bottom is just by type. So it's showing that blue is all distribution, which is just the water pipes. Next slide. And then here's sewer. I kept them on the same scale. I know it looks real squished, but I just wanted to show you the relative comparison between the water and sewer. So you can see, okay, water had that one, giant column of costs in FY30, and sewer comparatively is, a lot smaller. A lot of your existing debt service is sewer. So from my understanding, you did a lot of reinvestment in your sewer system, and now it's kind of water's turn. And Dan can correct me if that's not the case, but if we go to the next slide. So what these two charts show here, so this again is just for water, but the left chart are those revenue requirements, the costs. So again, these are in columns here. So the base year of FY25 and then the 5-year planning period. The blue again is the operating expenses. You can see that's kind of the majority of the costs. The red being the current debt service, green being cash funding of projects. There's a little bit of purple in there for new debt service because we converted that large cost stack to debt. And then the orange being the contribution to reserves. There's a light blue line kind of horizontally crossing almost at the top. That's what you're bringing in now for revenue. So anytime these columns are higher than that line, that's a shortfall because your expenses are higher than revenues. Anytime that line is higher than those, then it's a surplus. And that's what the chart on the right is showing the cash balance. Now there's also a slight sloping line, a darker blue line on that left chart. That's what we're proposing for revenue increases. And that reflects a 9% increase in FY26, a 9% increase in 27, and then really inflationary 3% increases after that. So we're hopefully getting to a point where we can just do inflationary increases, but we don't think we're there yet. And then you can see the impact to the operating balance. Again, that red line is our target. So you're just below the target right now, that 25% of operating expenses. But with the recommended revenue increases, you'll be just above that target line. And then shifting to sewer, which has the same scale, you'll see we're dealing with larger dollar amounts. Sewer is typically more expensive. Treatment is more expensive for sewer operations, so you're seeing more expensive things here. Again, the operating in blue, and as I mentioned before, so sewer, it appears you've done recent projects in sewer that were very capital intensive, so you can see all that red is the debt service you're now paying off for sewer. So you can see it's a lot more expensive than it was for water. And then green is cash funding of projects, orange being the contributions. However, for sewer, you only need about a 2% increase each year. So actually even less than inflationary 3%. really just 2%. And even doing the 2%, you can see your cash balance is growing beyond the target. So ideally, you could probably, you could be even withhold the 2%. And you could also think of the cash balances between water and sewer. It is technically one fund. It's one water and sewer fund. We did try to split it here just to, for purposes of keeping, what the water costs are in the sewer. Most of your customers have water and sewer. There may be some that have water only, maybe some that have sewer only. So by splitting it, it's being fair to them if they only pay one or the other. But this is what the need would be there. Next slide. This is just taking those, this is for water again. So your current rate design, if you're not sure, you have a charge that varies by meter size. That's a fixed charge. So regardless of how much water you use, you pay a quarterly fixed charge. And the majority of your costs are fixed, so it does make sense to have a portion be recovered through a fixed charge. The larger your meter size, the more you would pay for that fixed charge. But the majority of your customers, probably 90%, fall within that 5/8 or 3/4 inch meter. So right now it's $40.78. With that 9% increase, it would go to $44.44. And then any usage you have, just apply to per 100 cubic feet. And you can see that $2.96 becomes $3.23. And then the next one is for sewer. The same setup, quarterly fixed charge that varies by meter size. And then you'll see there's a bottom charge. You do have some customers, as I mentioned, that don't have any water service. They're unmetered. They're just charged for 10 units of usage. And next. So we always say is customers don't really care what their rates are. They want to know what their bill is going to be. So this is some sample bills for typical customers. We looked at an average user using 3,000 cubic feet per quarter, and then a small user who uses half of that, and then a large user who uses twice that amount. If we just focus that middle section, the average user, right now combined bill is, I gotta look at mine because that's hard to read, $384.48. That would go to $401.40. And you can see the percentages on the right column. So even though the water is going up 9% and the sewer is going 2%, because sewer is a larger portion of your bill, your combined bill only goes up 4%. So a typical customer would see a roughly 4% increase in their bill for next year. And next slide. And then comparing to surrounding utilities, it's always an apples and oranges because every system is different. The density, how many customers you have, the treatment process. But we find that elected officials always like to see this comparison, right or wrong. So the blue is water, green is sewer, and then the darker colors are Brattleboro. So you can see right now, current, just above the middle of the pack, and then with the increase, you'd stay roughly in that same position. And again, this only reflects rates from other utilities that we're able to find currently. We don't know if anybody else is doing an increase. It only reflects their current rates. Next slide. So moving on, we also looked at your fire protection charges. So these are customers who have a private fire line or a private hydrant. So this is not the majority of customers. This is usually commercial, industrial. And here we're just recommending a 3% increase each year for these. So on the last slide, so our recommendations, and I know you're not having to adopt anything today, but we would recommend adopting the next 5-year planning period like you typically do for both rates and charges and the fire line charges. And then ideally, the model we've built is the town's property. So we're working with Dan on kind of how to work with that model. He can take numbers, replace the budget numbers with actual numbers, see how, does everything still hold? If the 5-year plan holds, that's great, you don't need to touch it. If something else happens, you can come back and revise it up or down, depending on the nature of it. You really only need a consultant to come in maybe every 3 to 5 years if you want to do a full study. Yeah. Any questions?
I do.
Yes.
Thank you very much. This is very helpful. It's my understanding that the state of Vermont gives generous loans and/or grants for utilities. I know we experienced that recently with, a very, like a 1% interest rate and then a buyback and all that stuff. So the capital costs that you're discussing here, does that include the generous terms that the state of Vermont generally gives?
So your existing debt, the portion you're paying off now, yeah, that is pretty generous. Has some loan forgiveness in there or some interest forgiveness, and there's like maybe a 1 to 2% interest rate. So that's that's great that you can get that. We were a little more conservative when we projecting future interest rates. I'll have to double check. I think we used 3%, but I can check for you exactly what those numbers were and the maturity. But if you do notice that one slide for water that had that large amount that was going to be debt funded, the year we have the project, we don't start the payments till the next year. So I think only 1 year of that is even in the 5-year plan. So the future debt service is really like the next 5 years after the 5-year plan. Now the model does go 10 years, just so we see things don't fall off a cliff. We're recommending 5-year projection period, but there's a 10-year plan in the entire model. So yeah.
And then Dan, what Mike was just saying about taking over the model, you and your staff feel comfortable in working with that model?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have Mike's number, so if we need assistance, it's a matter of them looking over our shoulder initially, probably, and making sure we're plugging the numbers in correctly.
Great.
But.
And have you heard anything about the state being less generous in the future?
It's up in the air right now. I think we'll know more soon. A lot of that money's federal funding that has come through. So, right now the terms remain. Anything that we have in the works now will remain, but going forward, it's a little questionable. We should know soon. That large jump that was shown in that slide, that's kind of a result of that asset management plan we talked about last year that Dufresne Group produced for us. And historically, we've tried to cash fund all those projects, so we had some large jumps, between now and then. And after looking at the model and working with Mike, we thought about the size of that project and combining them and, looking towards that favorable debt funding for those large water main projects versus trying to cash fund them, because that was just going to drive the rates through the roof. So.
And I think what's proposed is also a big jump, and, we've been jumping a lot in Brattleboro. So I think that last chart that shows the increase in perspective is really the most helpful. Do other members wish to comment? Questions? Oscar?
Yeah, thank you. Seth, is it possible to bring that back up if it's not gone forever? In the meantime, that was a great presentation, great visualization in many different ways, but visualizing the costs and the changes over time, I thought that was all great. I was curious, is there a ballpark, I don't know who to ask, a ballpark cost of doing a study like this every 3 to 5 years?
So I mentioned about even the updates and the holding hands thing. We have clients who sometimes say, we don't want to do it every year. You guys just do the update. Update's a lot less expensive than the original cost because we've already got the model set up and it's really just input new numbers. Or sometimes you take a shot at it and send it to us and we do maybe like a day review or something like that. But if it's already a model that's been built, it's less expensive than if we had just come in and respond to an RFP or something like that. So yes.
Okay.
I don't want to quote you numbers today, but I can certainly.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Okay, so if you could go, I think, let's say page 8, maybe. Just 2 questions. So, and if you go back 1 page more, I just would like to understand a little bit more about it looks like even combining the two, there's a sizable balance. So I'm wondering if that's intentional policy on the town side. Are we saving up for something? Has it just accrued and that's a good problem to have? Or I guess maybe
the cash balance?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the recommendation that you mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, so when I mentioned before, I was talking about trying to make sure that each service covered itself.
Right.
Like you do have some sewer customers who don't receive water, but if you think of it kind of, it's one utility fund, and if you did combine those, I can bring you back a chart if we combine those. Maybe you don't need to do the 9%. Maybe it's something a little less.
Well, it's not so much the numbers itself. It's just that it looks like I'm just sort of wondering if there was like a strategic reason for building up that much of a balance. I guess.
Right. That was the 90-day.
So we took what you said you had for unassigned cash. So we wanted anything that's not reserved and not using for payroll. Like this is cash we could use if we didn't do a rate increase or as high a rate increase. could we hold it down with cash?
Yep.
So we took that number, we split it between water and sewer, and then Dan had some projects that were kind of, I guess, money's already in the works, so we had to take that out of that balance, and that's where it resulted with, it was a lot of that was water, so that's why water kind of dropped a lot more than sewer. We're starting at a lower balance because a lot of the projects were already for water.
Sorry, I think I'm asking this wrong. You go one page ahead?
Yeah.
If you add these two numbers up, we have something like 3 million on hand versus a target of, say, 1 million. So I'm wondering, did we intentionally build up more than we needed and now this is a good problem to have, or is this extra cash in sewer something that's sort of planned towards some other use? Or am I making...
I don't know that there was a reserve metric before. I think we kind of...
Okay, so this is just sort of
just
where
a result
it
of where it
ended up.
exactly.
And it's in excess of the recommendations of the study. Okay. And then my other question, I think it was a few pages back, but basically the big spike in expenses in the FY30, that's just, it looked like a bunch of water mains that are due to be replaced because of their lifetime?
Right. That came out of that hydraulic study we did with Dufresne Group, and it's a series. They prioritized replacements on older, more risky lines, and that's a series of replacements kind of bundled into one big project.
Okay. And the rate hikes presented in this study that includes accounting for the cost of this big jump in the last year?
Right.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you.
Let me just interrupt to ask a question. So, Dan, you were saying that Dufresne Group has an assessment of your needs, and that was really the basis for this financial assessment.
Right. That's kind of what drove us last year when we were looking at things, that we had incorporated that assessment into the capital plan. That's kind of what drove the need up, and now we're trying to best spread it out.
Great. That's very logical. Thank you. Other members have questions? Comments? Great. How about the public? Yes, Ivan.
Ivan Hennessy, Brattleboro, Vermont. I may be operating on bum information that I picked up randomly many years ago, but I was under the impression that sewer in Brattleboro isn't metered independently. Am I correct in that?
That's correct.
Yeah. So there's 1 meter on your water line, and we charge sewer based on that meter. We charge water and sewer based on the usage of that meter.
Yeah, that's why the unmetered sewer charge is just based on a theoretical 10 CCFs of usage, because we can't actually meter it.
So the theory is water in, water out.
Right.
Randy?
Randy Blodge, District 7. Just out of curiosity, where I used to live previously, what they would do, I sat in on a few of these over the years, and instead of, we have 5-6 years out before we billing, incremental rate increases before that, so it's not a 9% all at once. So hopefully in planning we'll look at that, because I think that would help people a lot more.
And is that what you're planning, Mike, or is this a jump?
Well, we want to get those 9% right off the bat, so we don't have to wait until that last year and do a 20% or a 30%, right? So we want to...
So the 9 is incremental.
Yeah, it's 2 9s now, and then we can get to inflationary 3s.
And that's why I was asking, just because it looked like it was out further, and you were saying about 2030.
No,
yeah. 30, so that's what I was trying to get a point when you're facing this.
Because the sooner you can build the revenue now, kind of compounding interest effect, the better it is for the future. Yeah.
Go ahead, Randy. Just come to the mic.
So moving forward, if I could just make a recommendation or that we look at is, since we are looking to try to plan better, that since now we have a consultant, they're looking at this, that, the 3-year, maybe it does pay to have a more frequent look to say, hey, we need another 0.5%, or we need something to keep that big, large rate increase from happening. Because like you said, we've had enough large ones recently.
Yes. And I think it's also important to note, as Dan did in his memo, and John Potter, that we reduced the rate significantly a couple years ago. And I think that we're paying for it now. Any other comments? Anyone online? Oscar?
Just a quick, I know we're not getting into the details now, but I assume that if we wanted, it looks like from the numbers that we could smooth out the water increases completely over the 5 years and we wouldn't be going negative on cash balances.
Yeah, you may year over year have a deficit in
Yes.
water, but the
But-
cash balance side, you should be okay.
Okay, so that's something we could think about
Yep.
if we didn't want to front load the two big jumps and wanted to do whatever it was, 4% a year for 5 years.
Yep.
And we can happily think about that, and I thank you gentlemen both very much. Is no more questions? I'll
I would just add that, so we'll take your feedback today and we'll bring back a draft utility budget, I believe, on June 3rd. Is that right, Dan? Or that's our goal. So.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very
All right.
much. Dan, Mike,
Thank
thank
you.
you for coming. All right. We're still moving right along. The monthly FY25 budget update.
Actually,
No one more.
No?
Legislative update.
Oh, I skipped too soon. All right, John Potter, please give us the state legislative update.
So I haven't had as much time as I would have liked to work on legislative matters this spring because we had other things to do. But I did get a chance to testify or provide testimony on two bills, which I summarized in your memo and also provided you the letters that I submitted on those. The first was H397, which was a bill that related to the local option tax distribution between the state and the local funding. And on that bill, I requested the Senate Government Ops Committee to consider instead of a 70% to the municipality, 30% retained by the state distribution, a 100% distribution to towns that support the GA motel program. And the rationale for that is that what the state does with the 30% that they retain on the local option tax is they use it for pilot payments to the towns. And so we get some of that. I don't think we get the full, $400,000 or $500,000 that is retained. We get considerably less. But the motel program is a situation where the state is essentially using private properties. They're providing vouchers or leasing private properties. So we're unable to get any sort of pilot payment for everything that brings to the town in terms of cost to the municipality. So my case was to go to 100% allocation for those. I think it was I want to say 13 or 14 towns in the state that both host motel program and have a local option tax. The committee was receptive. I would say that they asked a lot of good questions, which I followed up in that letter that's in your packet, answering a bunch of their questions. They understood what I was saying and they were sympathetic, but the tax department at the state was telling them that 75% is the highest that they should go in order to protect the pilot payments statewide. So that's what they did. They passed it out of committee with a 75% distribution to towns, up from 70%, but they didn't go any further and nothing specific for towns that host the GA motel program. The other bill that I provided feedback on was H91, which is a bill that relates to the homeless emergency assistance, basically the motel program. In that, again, I asked for some allocation of funding to municipalities that have ancillary costs as a result of this program. That bill, I understand that's being considered, whether there's any funding in there for municipalities or not. I think it's been gradually reducing from, I think They were originally talking about potentially $3 million in grants available to municipalities. I think that may be down to $1 million now. I'm not entirely sure on that. I haven't looked at the latest draft today. I do understand that H91 is likely for floor action on Thursday. So that's kind of an update on the two bills that I've really had the most time to spend with. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Oscar?
A note is I have also been, I think all of us have been privately working and talking to people to try to make something happen here it's all very much in flux, but based on a private conversation with a legislator last night, I was told that as of the bill could change at any point, but at that point there was still money in the bill for municipalities of some kind. So that, something helpful may come out of this for us. I'm hopeful.
It's been my experience that mayors have written, town managers, select board members, citizens, and, there's actually, I think that there's been some articles in the paper. It's important to note that it was a revelation to some of the legislators to understand that they needed to understand the impact of the motel program on the host municipalities. And there's been a lot of care to understand the problem of the unhoused and caring for the unhoused. But I think that there needs to be a sea change in the legislature for people to understand the impact to the host municipalities. Are there any other comments?
I want to say that I sincerely appreciate John's advocacy for the town of Brattleboro at a state level. There's been a lot of things to do over the last month and a half, and I appreciate so much you taking the time to stand up for us up there.
Thanks, Amanda.
So do I.
Thanks, Oscar.
I want to echo. I would like to echo those sentiments and just appreciation for your advocacy for funds for our town, for Montpelier. One of the concerns that I have heard from some of the service providers is that there's already a really stretched pool of funds for providing services to unhoused folks, and concerns that money not be taken out of that pool that's already being it's pretty stretched. So wanting, my hope is in the future that we can find as a state the funds to both support the unhoused population in our communities, as well as support the towns that are where there's the greatest amount of homelessness.
I would add to that, it would be my hope that the state would diversify the set of towns and the set of motels. And, not let Brattleboro bear the burden as they have been doing for the past 5 years. Anyone else? All right.
Public.
Now, pardon me?
Public.
Is there members of the public who would like to speak on this issue? Randy.
Quick question. Randy Blodgett. My understanding is that bill is a study period. So would any of that money, even if it does come to fruition, it's years away, right?
I believe that's true, yes. It would be next fiscal year that it could come into play.
Okay, thank you.
Oscar?
It's actually not clear to me. It's possible that some of that appropriation might be available as bridge funding for FY26 because, I've spoken to legislators and the point that waiting another year for a solution to be stood up is a big ask for the towns. They were receptive to that. So I wouldn't, none of us should hold our breath, but I think there's a possibility for FY26.
Christina's iPhone.
Working. Christina Cheyanye, District 8, representative town meeting member. So during so H91 hasn't been passed yet, and there will be, let's say it does get passed, there still will be a transition. And what I'm concerned about is that if we're moving towards nonprofits providing the services for people who are not getting their basic needs met, and away from municipalities having to do that, what's going to happen in the meantime? I'm just wondering where right now there are people where if it's raining all night or there's wind chill or flood season, or we're going to be where there's freezing cold temperatures before we know it. So just, I don't want H91 to stop us from making sure that nobody is needlessly dying on the streets of Brattleboro until then. Does that make sense? That was my comment. Thank you.
Let me just say that the state motel program is a state program. There is not a municipal shelter program. And there are private nonprofits who are providing shelter in the town of Brattleboro. And so there's a considerable amount of sheltering going on in Brattleboro. It is not municipally based. Yes, Oscar.
I'd just like to add that I believe, I don't know for sure, but for FY26, while the study is happening and the new program is being designed, I believe the current program will continue in much the same form. I certainly could be wrong. I'm not an expert on the state level stuff, but I also think we should keep talking, Christina, about the shelter needs in the community. I definitely want to keep working on that and having that conversation separately.
All right. Has everyone spoken who needs to speak?
Christina did raise her hand again, if you want to.
Who did?
Christina raised her hand again.
All right. Christina? You have a minute.
Okay. Thank you, Liz, for my minute. I just wanted to clarify that currently the nonprofit organizations who are providing services in town are at capacity, and even though they have access to state funds, they cannot expand their shelter capacity with those state funds. So it can't just be put on to them, oh, it's not a municipal thing, the nonprofit organizations are taking care of it. They aren't taking care of it. They're doing everything they can, and there's more of it that needs to be taken care of. Thank you.
All right, moving right along. Item G, monthly FY25 budget update. John?
Yeah, so the select board has asked for a monthly financial report on the FY25 budget through the end of the fiscal year. The finance team has been working really hard on putting together a parking fund budget and a utility fund budget, but they were able to confirm the numbers that are in your packet for budget to actuals through April 2025. And with that information, we were able to do an initial projection through the end of the fiscal year, which is also provided in your backup materials. And that shows us our current net revenue is $2.4 million. We're expecting additional revenues through the end of the year of $529,000 from rooms and meals tax, $238,000 from sales tax, and at least another $240,000 in EMS reimbursements. I understand that's even a little higher now than that was expected. We have an expected bond payment of $973,000 to go out, and we are annualizing the remaining expenditures for May and June at $3.4 million. So that leaves us with $883,773 in deficit, with the Article 9 approvals at the RTM, which was that use of fund balance, you'll recall, for the Downtown Safety Action Plan and the additional costs on the solid waste contract, and that use of fund balance was approved at $851,836. So that leaves us an overall projected loss at the end of the fiscal year of approximately $32,000. And that's our best estimate right now. That loss would be within 0.1% of budget, and we are also actively working to still try to close that gap if possible. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions that I can that you may have on this report.
Who has questions? Oscar?
I do, but someone else can go first.
I just wanted to express appreciation for you and the town staff, Mr. Potter, for putting together this report and your work to close that gap. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac.
Oscar?
Yes, okay. Couple questions. First of all, also, thank you. I am appreciative of this, and I will, I'll happily go on the record by saying that I know you're saying you're working to close the gap. If the gap at the end of FY25 is $30,000 in deficit, you're not going to hear a word of complaint from me. That's minuscule and well within the bounds of sort of normal, just how it goes operating a big budget. So a couple clarifying questions from me. Expected bond payments have their own item here. There's also a bond/notes expenses line about half of the way down. Are those, and so there in the line items, there's 800,000 left in bonds. Are those two separate, has that been pulled out just because it's a big thing and actually the number is 973, or is this a separate $973,000 thing?
I don't know. I will find that out for you. I believe the 973 is probably what we have the most current knowledge on. So,
okay.
Yep.
But either way, as long as either way, that's more for my own information because the math sort of works out either way on that, I think. The annualized spending for the next 2 months, I poked around a bit on my own and feel fine about. I think we were $1.7 million spent in April, front-loaded at the beginning of the year, but I'm comfortable with that. I have two questions beyond this. Fire revenue is way up from April. It's a $640K jump. I understand we had a ton of reimbursements outstanding, but in the budget, the non-EMS fire revenue is budgeted at like 100,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So the majority of fire revenue is EMS. Mm-hmm. That would mean, well, first let me ask the clarifying question. I think the answer is yes. This $1.37 million includes the $250K in seed ARPA funding, right?
Yes.
Okay. Even so, $1.1 million through 10 months in fire revenue would be a huge overperformance in EMS reimbursements. So that would be great news. I just wanted to double check because it's a big jump and that we feel good about those numbers and that's actually happening.
Yeah, I think it is actually happening. I think it's being driven by our call volume, one thing. It's also, this is an estimate, so it's based on accounts receivable. That still might not materialize by the end of the year. I think you should be thinking 100 or 150,000 play in that is potentially, either way, is probably a reasonable way to think about it. But it's basically what we have in hand right now is $877,386. Our accounts receivable are $459,103. Since these numbers were completed in April, at the end of April, we already have another 117,000 in hand additional. So that
sorry, can you give me those two numbers again?
The 877,386 was in hand at April 30. We now have an additional 117,000 in hand. We are projecting 459 in accounts receivable, which is based on the percentage performance that we've been
So
seeing.
that's really, whatever, $1 million and change of billings. That's, I mean, yes, so if all that bears out, that would be a huge windfall, basically.
We're doing well, yes.
It's also a lot of work.
It is, but we've already sort of seen and sort of agonized over the expenses side of that in the overtime and in the new staff position. So this, I think, if it bears out, will be really welcome. So that is great to hear that it's looking that way.
Yes, and one thing that I wanted to just pivot on that for a second is to say that in my comments at the start, I neglected to mention that it is also EMS week this week, and the job that our crews have been doing has been outstanding. I mean, they are responding to 14, 15 calls in a shift. It's an extraordinary amount of work that they've been putting into this, and I'm really so grateful to the EMTs, the number that have gotten AEMT status now, and the number who are trying to get to become paramedics, and those that have already become paramedics. I think we should be super grateful to them, and this is a week to recognize them. And so if you have a chance to stop by the fire station and give them a thank you, I think that this week would be a really great week to do it.
That's a great addition. Yeah, thank you. And I think it probably doesn't quite go without saying, so I'll say it, but I think most of the agonizing over the EMS program, certainly 100% of it from me has nothing to do with, I have nothing but gratitude for their performance and the work they do, and I saw them in action on my police ride-along and still need to schedule my EMS ride-along. It's just been, is this going to work out the way we hoped financially, and are we going to be able to support it? So my other question is...
Can I just interrupt?
Sure.
Direct the public to the backup, which is quite voluminous, but there's the general fund, all departments, page 2 of 18. The EMS reimbursement there is a line that I think caught your attention, or similar to the question that you've been asking. I just want to tell people that's where it is. That's where this $837,127 is, and then the projected actual of $1,336,488. And so even by subtracting the $250,000 that was seed money for the EMS, we are exceeding, or we expect to exceed the budgetary amount. So I just wanted to talk about that while you're on that subject.
Yes, that is yeah, so it's at the end of the backup materials.
It's not in here. Yeah, we don't have it. It's not.
Even at because there's the like agenda item by agenda item stuff, which just has the summary. You guys don't have this big last chunk. Okay, it's in the digital materials. We'll find a way to get it to you guys. And I didn't realize there was a detail in there either. So that's great.
And and then you can look at all the
It is
police
in there?
calls too, if you'd like.
Kate seems to have it.
There's a whole...
The finance department.
Yeah, finance department, and it's a huge spreadsheet. I think it's in there.
I will.
It follows the warrants.
It's in the finance
department.
It's
Department
after the
reports.
warrants.
It's like very...
I didn't know it was there either, Dick.
Well, it shouldn't be buried, it should be under the...
We can include it in the main section next time. That's fine.
Well,
If
that's
we-
a lot. But what we have is the report, which, Oscar brought up the same information, so.
But it is nice that in here the EMS is broken out because I was doing all this sort of
Yeah.
thought experiment stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, you asked your next question.
Yeah, sorry.
I just wanted to bring that up.
no, that's great. Are there other areas? I guess I'm slightly surprised to find sort of projected accounts receivable stuff in here. I don't know that I think that's wrong or anything. Are there other areas in here where I guess it's relatively rare for us to have outstanding accounts receivables. But
The property tax is that way, so that's accounts receivable and included in that amount in the report. I think most of them are. I'm not sure about sales tax.
Because I thought most of them were pure actuals. So that may just be my misunderstanding, but if that's something that was ambiguous to other people, I don't think
I think this has been, this is a new presentation based on what our new financial team wants to structure. So I think that I had to get used to that, and we can all get used to that.
I think so. I think possibly some way of marking lines that say this includes account receipt. Because I looked at this and I was like, my God, if we have received $1.37 million in fire revenue literally in the bank, then we are like blowing the doors off projections in a good way. And we still are exceeding them. But so that's just a thought that might make things more clear.
So that number does include the 350, correct?
250, but yes. And it's still, I'm just going to say again, the numbers are still good even if you take that out, which is nice. Okay, sorry, so two or possibly one other thing. So here's the big question I have. We are correctly subtracting out the 850 in approved use of fund balance. My worry, my question is, have we spent all of those costs? So, for example, if we haven't actually bought the bins yet, that would still be a future outstanding expense that this money sort of needs to be earmarked for. So to say, to use it in this context, in that hypothetical case, I'm not so sure about.
Yes, most of that, except for May and June projected, has been expended already of
for
that
the downtown
amount.
Safety Action Plan.
Yep, and the solid waste contract, both of them. So it has nothing to do with the bins. That's completely outside of the general fund.
Okay.
All it is the incremental cost increase on the Casella contract over what we were paying Triple T.
Okay. So I guess the final fold to that question would be, is this 851 number, is that prorated down to 10 months, or is that the full amount?
That's the full amount.
But I guess but that's appropriate because this whole thing is looking out to the end of the year. Okay.
Projection, yep.
Okay. I think I'm done for now, at least.
Great.
Thank
Are
you.
there other select board members who would like to comment? No. Isn't that nice? All right. Would members of well, yes, they would. Let's go to Kate because she hasn't spoken yet this evening.
Hi, everybody. Kate O'Connor. I have a question about the chart that shows our projected revenue loss of $31,000. And I hope you can follow me on this. The EMS revenue, as we just discussed, includes the $250 from what was ARPA at the time, but it's special project funds. And as we've just discussed, even without that $250, we're projected to make the $851. That $250 was put explicitly in the EMS budget under the assumption we weren't going to make the $850. So to me, that $250 needs to be taken out and put back in the special projects because it's artificially making it look like we're only going to deficit spend by $31,000. But if we didn't have that $250, we'd be deficit spending by $281,000. So instead of that $250 doing what it was intended to do, which is make sure we got $851 in revenue for EMS, it's actually floating the FY25 budget, which was not its intended purpose. So I really hope you folks would think about that, because it was not intended to make us not deficit spend in FY25. It was there to make sure we got the EMS revenue. And we can go back to prior meetings and we can verify what I am saying is true. So I just think to say that we're only going to deficit spend by $300 or $31,000 if all goes well, is not true because that 250 is being used now for something that it shouldn't be intended for.
Go ahead, Jim.
I really disagree. I mean, a budget is a plan, and we've implemented that plan, and we're coming very close to what we set out to do a year and a half ago.
Oscar?
I see what you're saying, Kate, and certainly, I mean, a lot of things are floating, a lot of other things in this budget. It looks like even taking the 250 out of the equation, like we're going to go, I'm doing this off the top of my head, but we're going to go substantially over in overtime. We're going to go substantially over in benefits. So in some ways we are fortunate that mostly unrelatedly, EMS revenue looks to be overperforming. That's not ideal. I think you'd rather see everything be more predictable and smooth. And I take your point, but, well, no, I take your point, but the 250 was in the plan for the budget all along, and would it be better if EMS was coming in under and then we were making up the gap that way, and now that EMS is coming in over and we're having good luck, we feel we need to take that back out? Let's talk about it more. I see what you're saying, but I need to think about it.
Well, I just think it's a very negative way to look at it, and instead of understanding that the EMS is doing well and our deficit spending is 31,000, you're kind of making a worst case where it's not necessarily necessary to do so. There's other people wanting to comment. Dick, Randy?
I'd like to say one thing in that I think it speaks to the larger perspective and a longitudinal perspective, which is concerns for our spending, concerns for how we spend, what pockets we take out of what, et cetera. And I'm really looking forward to passing the budget on next Tuesday night. And then for our fiscal year 27, I think all of the commentary we've gotten from the public is really helpful and helps our future perspective and wisdom there. So I appreciate that. And we just hope to pass that budget and move on to the next one.
Mr. DeGray?
It sounds like everybody's giddy over the EMS funds coming in, or what's been billed, but how much bad debt do we have? How much are we not going to collect and have to write off? And so you can talk about any amount of money that you're billing. It's what you put in your pocket after you send the bill. And I had asked this a couple of months ago, and I was told that, well, once the year is done, we'll have a better idea. You should have an idea right now what your bad debt is, and we haven't heard anything about the bad debt, especially going back at least to quarter one, that you should have numbers on that you can say, well, we billed $600,000 and we took $300,000 in, and we haven't heard any of that. So I'm not all excited about everybody saying, well, this funding looks like this until we find out what the bad debt is. Again, it looks like, to me, given the overage of the overtime in the fire department and the overtime in the police department, Public Works looks like it's going to bail us out again this year, which is putting a heavy burden on one department, and I'm concerned about that. So if you could talk a little bit about the potential, our bad debt numbers, that you should have some idea where we are, and even with the bad debt, if we are going to hit the numbers that you're talking about, that would be great, but I don't think that's going to happen.
We'll talk about that when the fire department comes next to speak about their program. And when will that be, John?
They'll do a quarterly update in the end of next quarter. So after
there you
that.
go.
But I will just say that, all along the board's conversations, I'm not sure I would characterize it as bad debt, but when the board set the rates, there was an understanding at that time that we wouldn't be collecting that full amount, like rarely would we be collecting that full amount. The whole reason for doing that was to capture as much of the private insurance costs as the town could. So it's really kind of misdirecting the conversation to talk about it as debt. That was never the select board's intention.
And the projected 837,000 assumed a certain percentage of collection.
That's right.
And when you assume collection percentage, you're also assuming a certain amount of bad debt. And that was discussed and that was projected.
And then the other like minor correction on what Dick said, I think Public Works is going to be very close this year, so I don't think they're bailing anybody out here. Everyone is working together to try to come and close that 30,000 if we can, but basically to come in as close as we can on this budget, and everyone's like real tight on the line here. So,
Randy?
I did have one follow-up question that I asked a couple of weeks ago when we were doing the budget, and we found out that we were $418,000 short. And I asked if there were issues in this current budget with funds that weren't initially in the budget that we're in. Is that number, are all those numbers that are in this budget correct? And so you ran the numbers and the numbers for retirement and benefits, and everything is copacetic in this budget.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Randy?
I have just a couple questions. I like to see that I can see a CPA is doing the accounting now because it's more recognizable than it was before you have the new consultant in finance in. So a lot of the things I'm assuming that people are asking is it's just different. One I'm going to ask is the transfers, where it's generically said transfers. And I'm assuming that finance is now transferring stuff between accounts or recognizing things in a different way, that's what that probably is. Another question is, so congratulations on EMS, but a little bit different way than Dick talked about it. So increased calls, overtime is still in work. 3 new firemen are going to take some time to bring on board and get trained and everything. So we're still going to have the overtime issue. And then if there are increased calls, so I guess when the fire chief comes in next, if there was some way to chart this picture for the public from some point in the past to where we are at that point, to try and show, hey, we're getting our arms around this, would be my suggestion, and to show it as granularly as we can, because otherwise, you know, one number's higher, another number's higher, and where are we really at? And when we're only 10 months into it, what do we know? The last part with the debt, like how Dick put it, so I know we have our 2 rates, depending if it's Medicare, Medicaid, or major insurance, $1,400. If we collect co-pays, we bill for 270 days. If there's the difference, the donut hole, whatever you want to call it. And I guess, Dick, were you looking at what is that number?
Yeah.
So that may be nice just to know. And with the idea, like Liz said, that we're not expecting to get. But at least if we know what it is and then we have a history of here's what we can expect based on what we actually got. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Randy. So when the fire department comes and gives their quarterly update, we'll make sure that they bring the assumptions of the model and the assumptions of what the payments would be and what the non-payments would be, because that was thoroughly discussed when we made our decision and the rollout thus far. So that's a known estimated number that we're using to this day.
Can I add one more request to that, which I think would be pretty small? Not just the estimated number, but sort of the actual number to date of how
course.
repayments have been going.
Of course, yes. And I think that we've heard testimony about that, and we will continue to, and then we will compare it to the earlier assumptions.
Do
Yes,
we use
Randy.
an aging report, since we are mentioning about accounts receivable now?
We'll have to consider that.
I meant across town, like not just UMass, but do we use an aging report? Or do we use that across our county?
No, not that I'm aware of, so, yep.
For anyone listening, Randy was asking if we use an aging report in town accounting, just because you weren't at the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
But we should have a number of people that thank you. We should have a number of people that we are treating without insurance.
I'm sure we do, and that's what I was just asking to have at the next quarterly thing, and it sounds like...
Yeah, it may just be we'll have to figure out how to put all that type of information together.
And, there's a certain...
Who would do it.
There's a certain level of finesse in that we are asking people to pay, and the debt is not written off until a certain time frame. So we don't want to assume a write-off that is not yet on the books. Someone may pay.
But the point is well taken. We don't want to be overestimating based on what we think we have coming in. I think that point's well taken.
Heidi, did you have a comment?
Heidi Fisher, District 7. I will reiterate once again my plea for, at the same time of looking at all the revenues from EMS, to please have clear numbers about the expenses of EMS.
Thank you.
For staff and all of that. That includes truck maintenance, supplies, everything that it's costing to run the program.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions, or are we ready as a board to accept the monthly FY25 financial report as presented?
I have one more thing.
You have one more thing?
I find the transfers section and all that business very confusing also, so I just want to flag this and I guess put it on the radar of next month's financial report. We are, in our table, we are at the end saying, and then we have all this fund balance approved. There are transfers of various kinds in the budget itself as revenues and as expenses. There is even a revenue, I lost it, but there is a revenue line item for transfer from use of fund balance or transfer of fund balance. So I'd just like to pose the question for next month's financial report and make sure that we're not double counting that as a revenue and then also as something we're subtracting out in the table.
No, the two, if you go to page 18 of 18, so the two transfers out are,
so I'm more worried about, well, not worried, I'm more talking about the transfers in on page, like the bottom of page 3. The use of fund balance is budget, not actual, so that's probably fine, but then there's just sort of a miscellaneous transfers in actual of $910K. So I want to make sure that we're not double counting that. So we don't have to hash it out now, but it's at the very top of page 4. 49025 transfers in.
Oh, okay. Yep. So you're saying, is that 910,000 also in these other lines?
No, also in the table, because, so for example, if the approved use of fund balance is already in revenues as part of the revenues total, and then we subtract it out again in the table, we would be double counting that money. We would be saying, oh, it's part of our revenues, and then we would also be saying, but we're also allowed this as an overage. So I just want to flag that for next month.
Okay.
As just
So clarify the transfers.
Make sure that that line item is not the same thing as this line in the table, and that we're not double counting it.
So that would be a pretty big accounting error made by our accountant if
it would be, and that's why I'm
case.
saying it's a dotting the I's, crossing the T's type of question.
Okay.
Look,
second that. Let me ask David to speak before you guys speak again.
You, David Lovenbach, District 9. I want to echo all of the questions for data on EMS revenues, but then let me say again, that needs to be presented on a quarterly basis with the billables in a quarter matched against the collections from what was billed in that quarter. And that's something I'm still waiting for, and I think it's absolutely critical to know how the money is flowing and whether we're in good shape or bad shape. I am, in fact, delighted, and Finance Committee, in fact, gathered even in March that EMS collections were doing a whole lot better than the forecast, and that's good news. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Just a short comment. I think what would sort it all out is just a footnote. So in essence, more detail, like several people have said, but just when you can put transfer and then just put see footnote. I mean, that's how a lot of financial documents I've looked at to where you can follow. So if it is a transfer in two places, that denotes that it isn't being used twice. So it's just simply a footnote or some other way, a summary or something of saying what transfer A, transfer B is versus just saying transfer.
Thank you. Dick?
One thing, parking budget, which is page 1 of 2. I don't know what number it is because I just grabbed Amanda's. I couldn't get it on my tablet.
It's basically all the way at the end past the warrants.
I have it. And you should be discussing this budget because if you look at your under budget and revenue, looks like $359,602.67. And that is a substantial number. And in the conversation 2 weeks ago when you were talking about parking adjustments and eliminating Sunday parking and adding 2 hours, taking away $43,000 of revenue a year versus an unknown number, that really concerns me. This parking budget is really in sad shape. It's not generating any revenue from the transportation center, and it'll be interesting to see what the general fund will be paying the parking fund for rental on that space, given what condition this parking fund is in. And I'm not sure if the board is concerned about the parking fund as it should be. We just had a great report on an enterprise fund, water and sewer, which was very telling about the enterprise fund and how it works. And we should be applying the same logic to this parking fund because it's within a couple of years, it's going to be falling on the taxpayer's shoulders because we're the undersigners of the parking fund. So if anybody wants to talk about that, that would be great at this point.
Well, I'm sure the board is all very concerned about the parking fund and has been for years. Yes, Isaac?
Yeah, my understanding from thank you for raising this concern, and I share concern about revenue generation from parking and want to make sure that we're able to make a profit from this. But my understanding from the presentation that was done, I believe it was at our last meeting, was that a significant part of these expenses was the startup costs in terms of getting this transitioning to this new system, and then we're not going to be seeing an expense of, $846,000 ongoing. Is that correct?
No, not entirely, Isaac. So the plan was with the Sunday parking, and was that we would pull out a deficit after next year, I believe. I'm kind of just from memory. So that will have to be relooked at again when you consider the parking budget for FY26 in a couple weeks. And we'll break it out there, like kind of how the revenues are versus like the ongoing costs, not anything that went into the transition. Most of that transition was paid for by a grant. I think there might have been a small match or something like that. But so it's really, this is primarily operating costs, and it's just that we were planned a deficit in that last budget in FY25.
Thank you. Then I look forward to that conversation.
Yep.
Oscar?
I would just say that the only reason I'm not bringing it up now is because I feel like we were all already pre-concerned about it from last meeting, and we're going to look at new rates. And so I definitely am concerned. This just maintains my level of concern where it was from last meeting. I do think the specific point of do we want to be cutting Sunday parking at a time when we're running at a deficit? That's a good question. Should we be aiming for a revenue target that's a little higher because, we've been spending out of our reserves in this fund for a little while? Maybe. Yeah, I think that's something we can talk about when we get to the budget. But and then my only other question, this is something I think I raised in passing a little while ago, but would be helpful for me to know. I do know that the plan was to run this year at a revenue deficit. It would be helpful to know what the deficit number we planned for was and sort of where we are versus the deficit we were hoping to be at. So maybe that's something for next meeting.
And we can talk about that when we talk about the parking again. Okay? Are we ready to accept the FY25 monthly budget report as presented?
Somebody make a...
Go right ahead, Pete.
All right. Why don't I make the motion then? To accept the FY25 monthly budget report as presented.
Great. Are we ready? Pete has made a motion to accept the FY25 monthly budget report as presented. All select board members in favor of that motion, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And there we are, 5-0. Now, we have the last item, which is representative town meeting motions. John, do you want to walk us through that?
Sure. As you know, you've warned a special representative town meeting for May 27th. At that meeting, the town moderator will call on the select board to make motions regarding the articles in the warning, as well as 2 preliminary motions. And so this item before you tonight is just to run that language by you and also to hopefully determine who would make the various motions that night so that we can inform the moderator of it ahead of the meeting.
Is there anyone who has comments about the wording of the motions on the select board?
Let me just quickly rescan.
And then while some of you are reading, you can decide whether you want to volunteer to read any of these preliminary motions.
Well, I have no opinion, but I'm happy to read or not read any of the motions.
Great.
I hope that's helpful.
I get the big one. Does someone want to read motion number 1?
Sure.
Great. I'll write your name down there. And preliminary motion number 2?
I'll read that.
Okay. And is there any more discussion on that? And would someone like to read this motion that we have to accept the motions? Kind of redundant, but there it is.
I got it. I will motion to accept the motions for the May 27th, 2025 special representative town meeting as presented and assign them as discussed.
Okay. Are we good? all in favor of that? Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Speaking about the articles that you're going to read, what is the board's position if people try to add money to the budget for anything specific, but example, assistant town manager and or filling the other half position of the climate coordinator? Is the board going to take a stance and say we oppose that? That would be great if you did.
It's not germane to this topic.
Sure it is.
We'll leave it to the moderator to determine.
It's germane. It's a question to the board right now because you're discussing the article, and why wouldn't it be germane? All I'm asking is for an answer of what the board's position is if people try to add funds to the budget.
And
you get to have an opinion.
It's up to the moderator.
No, it is not. It's up to you as the board.
I think we actually already discussed this at a prior meeting. Did we not, when we had the conversation about those positions? I think we had a discussion about it and said if someone wants to bring this for discussion at representative town meeting and they want to increase the amount, then they can discuss that.
I think what Dick is asking is how we feel about it.
Yeah, which I agree isn't germane to this, which is just to accept these motions. I think in general we'll do what boards have always done, which is that if, unless it's something egregious, if RTM makes an amendment with a recommendation, by default we would try to honor that. I think that's what boards have done. I'm personally thinking that I will probably say that this budget is the best I could do, and if RTM wants to change it, I'll abstain from any amendments they make, but I haven't really thought it through. But
Well,
I think we're...
if you're asking my opinion about the budget, I voted for it, I support it. I'm not interested in changing the work that we did. However, and I assume with a 5-0 vote that the rest of the board supports the budget that we are presenting to RTM. What RTM chooses to do with that, and we'll get a budget. And as you say, RTM does not have line item veto on our budget. So if they give us a number, it's up to us to deal with it. And that's the legality of the situation. Are we ready to vote? Have we voted?
I made a motion, didn't I?
You did.
I was ready right after
Anyone
I read
else
the
have
motion.
any comments? All right.
I smiled when Peter made the motion because he makes the motion so well. That like radio voice, I was captivated. That's why you saw me smiling.
Jeez, I didn't expect it to go there.
It was a great motion.
Okay, let's get our radio voices on.
All right.
And
I got you.
all select board members in favor of accepting the motions for the May 27, 2025 special representative town meeting as presented and assign them as discussed. Please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
All right, 5-0. Thank you all. There's one more motion. We could have a radio voice or someone else. Isaac,
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
great. All select board members in favor of adjournment, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
There's another
President said it was
5-0.
good.
Tell Jessica I tried my best.
I think you still do.